Good morning, and welcome to today's memorial ceremony in honor of those who gave the ultimate sacrifice September 11th, 2001, 19 years ago today. Please join me in the posting of our nation's colors.
Prepare to post. Post. Honor guard. Break cover. Preset. Post. Order. Post. Right. Peace. Upward. Post.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were not able to host a normal dedication ceremony at our fire station. But Mayor Morley, City Manager Grabowski, and the elected officials knew that we had to find a way to keep our promise, a way to honor all of the families who lost a loved one. All of the firefighters, police officers, paramedics, and first responders who died as the towers fell on top of them that day. We found a way to bring the memorial to you virtually from the City Memorial here at Spring Road and the Prairie Path. Today, several individuals will share stories with you about what they remember most on that horrific day. And you will hear how it changed their lives just as it changed all of ours forever. Knowing that there were 343 brave firefighters who lost their lives running into that World Trade Center on this day 19 years ago, I would like to start the memorial off with the firefighter prayer. When I am called to duty, God, whenever flames may rage, give me the strength to save someone's life, whatever be its age. Help me to embrace a little child before it is too late, or save an older person from the horror of that fate. Enable me to be alert, to hear the weakest shout, and to quickly and efficiently to put the fire out. I want to fill my calling and give the best in me, to guard my every neighbor and protect their property. And if according to my fate I am to lose my life, please bless me with your protecting hand, the special people in my life. I would now like to welcome the Honorable Mayor Morley to the podium.
Good morning. The City of Elmhurst comes together annually on Patriot Day in memory of those who were killed in the September 11th attacks in 2001. Innocent men, women, and children were killed that day. It was a day that brave men and women, our first responders, put their lives before others in the face of danger to save many during the catastrophic terrorist attacks on our country. It was a day that we will never forget. It was on that day and in the days that followed that we as Americans were tested. It was a day that we as Americans were reminded that not everybody in the world believes what the framers of our Constitution did. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To honor those who were lost, I ask that you take the time to reflect on our beliefs as Americans. This year we have been challenged with a different type of crisis, but one nonetheless where we must all come together. Our intentions are always to invite the public to this event, but this year we are faced with the safety challenges of COVID-19, which is why we are here to bring this ceremony to you virtually. In 2020, we as Americans are being tested by the pandemic and social unrest. In the wake of the terrorist attacks in 2001, differences were put aside, and a bill to make September 11th a national day of mourning was introduced to the House of Representatives on October 25th, 2001. That bill had 22 co-sponsors, among them 11 Democrats and 11 Republicans. The bill requested that the President designate September 11th of each year as Patriot Day. We need to put aside our differences on Patriot Day and come together to remember and honor the victims of 9/11. My condolences to the families and friends who are remembering this tragic day and the people in their lives that they lost. God bless the victims and their families. God bless Elmhurst, and God bless the United States of America.
At this time, the fire department bugler will play taps as we place a fire helmet and a police hat down in honor of those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. At this time, I would now like to call Deputy Police Chief Mike McLean to the podium.
Good morning. Thank you all for participating in this important memorial to recognize the sacrifice of so many Americans 19 years ago. I was asked to say a few words today regarding my memories from September 11th as a police officer in Elmhurst, and I'm honored to represent the police service who, along with the firefighting and armed services, sacrificed so much that day. As a police officer, many days fade away from your memory over time, but some days are forever burnt into your thoughts, like the day you made your first arrest, the day you performed CPR on a heart attack victim who survived, or the first time you encountered a man with a gun. Like most who witnessed that day, the events of September 11, 2001 are always with me. I was assigned as a patrol officer to the afternoon shift. The night prior, I finished my shift around midnight and went home to my wife and our 1-month-old daughter. They were fast asleep, and soon so was I. That Tuesday morning, my wife woke me up and told me to watch the news with her. As time went by, we saw what America saw. The crashing, the explosions, the confusion, the fear in people's faces, and the bravery of firefighters and police officers running toward the attack scenes in New York City. Later, the bravery of the soldiers, sailors, and airmen responding to the attack at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. As a police officer who often responded to crimes in progress, I was well aware that the first pieces of information that come out when events are unfolding can be confusing, misleading, or wrong. The military calls this the fog of war. The morning of September 11th was no different. Americans soon knew the nation was under attack, but they did not know by whom. Conflicting reports were quickly being relayed to us by the media. It was soon time for me to report for duty at the police station. As I drove in, I wondered, what's going to happen next? As a police officer, what can I do to help? I reported to roll call with my fellow officers, and we saw this was going to be an important briefing. The police chief and deputy chiefs were there. Like great leaders can, they broke down this complex, tragic, and confusing day that was still unfolding into a few simple principles to guide me and my fellow officers by. The command staff had implemented security at various important locations in Elmhurst to protect against potential attacks. Police officers were stationed at city buildings, schools, water facilities, and other important infrastructure. They said that we were at war, but we did not know with whom. They said our country suffered great losses today. A lot of citizens, police officers, and firefighters died. They directed the officers to concentrate on patrols of neighborhoods and public spaces. The most important thing they said during that roll call still sticks with me today. Right now, our residents don't know what will happen next. People are scared, and when they look out their windows, they need to see that the police are here for them and will protect them. It was up to us. And that's what we did. It was a very somber shift, but we made sure the extra patrols were there to reassure the public. The gravity of September 11th was felt throughout America, including Elmhurst. That night at the end of our shift, my beat partner, Rich Linaway, and I were at the city garage refueling our squad cars. We both were silent, looking up at the sky. There were no airplanes in the normally busy O'Hare Airport flight path. No flashing lights, no jet noise. It was eerily quiet, an opposite bookend to the events of the morning. Rich said to me that America would be different now. Children growing up from now on would always know that something like this could happen in our country. What Rich said was true. Children would learn about September 11th terrorist attacks and the many people that lost their lives. But there is more to September 11th than tragedy. The history of September 11th would be incomplete without recognizing the bravery, sacrifice, and service of first responders and others who evacuated survivors, rescued the injured, and recovered the dead from burning buildings, knowing that they could be attacked at any time and knowing that they may not survive. Those that made the ultimate sacrifice that day saved thousands of lives, not because it was their job, but because it was their duty. It was the core of who they were as first responders. Firefighters and police officers today wear the same uniforms they did. Let us be deserving of that privilege by being the best first responders that we can be, for they have sacrificed everything in the service of the same professions. In the days that followed September 11th, the country came together, united in purpose to support the victims in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. In the months that followed, that patriotic purpose continued as a united country supported its firefighters and police officers at home and its soldiers, sailors, and Marines deployed overseas. Protecting the country was a team effort. I remember a few months after September 11th, I happened to meet a soldier who was soon to be deployed to Afghanistan. He was concerned about leaving his family when the threat of terrorism was still so strong. He said to me, "Don't let us down at home while we're gone." That still sticks with me today. The awesome responsibility that they placed in us as first responders when facing the unknown. September 11th was a tragic attack, a punch to the gut, but we should find comfort and solace in the countless heroic acts performed that day and the strength and unity we as a people exhibited in the days after. We were and are truly in this together. Thank you.
It is now 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time, and American Airlines Flight 11, carrying 92 people from Boston to Los Angeles, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. At this time, I would like to call the Commander of the Honor Guard and the Sergeant at Arms for the Elmhurst American Legion Post, William Shakelin, to the podium.
Good morning. "We will always remember" is one of the mottos in our community. For over 100 years, we have remembered and honored members of our active duty military personnel, veterans, and especially members of our armed forces that made the supreme sacrifice for our country in responding to being attacked by a foreign country. Today we are here to honor members of our firefighting and law enforcement community that paid the price and made the sacrifice responding to the September the 11th, 2001 attack on our country. This attack reshaped the face of our nation and the course of history. Our lives and the lives of those to come around the globe have changed forever. Why is it important to remember this event? Because it's part of our history. It's been 19 years since this attack. We have a new generation that needs to know about this to develop a better understanding of the world in which we live. Building knowledge and understanding historical events and trends, especially over the past century, enables us to develop a much better appreciation of the current events today. Maybe we can learn from our mistakes leading to this tragedy. Remembering 9/11 continually reminds us of the courage and bravery of our first responders, running toward the tragedy instead of running away from it. What should we remember? September the 11th will forever evoke a recollection of unimaginable tragedy, of lives callously lost and brutally cut short, and of unspeakable horror and sorrow. We felt, especially those of us, remember seeing people jumping from the tower, preferring another way to die. We must never forget the depths that international and domestic terrorists will go to destroy the principles of freedom and democracy on which our nation was founded. Here is some of the information we should remember. I picked up these statistics from a CNN database. There were 19 terrorists that hijacked 4 aircraft. Right around 3,000 people were killed in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, PA. 343 New York City firefighters died in the initial attacks and collapse of the buildings. 23 New York City police officers died. 37 Port Authority officers died. The youngest was a 2-year-old that was attending the daycare center in the building. The oldest was an 85-year-old person. I don't know how many victims died from the diseases they contracted resulting from the cleanup of the 1.6 million tons of smoking debris. 20 days after those towers fell, I happened to be in New York, and I got within 2 blocks and I could see down into the debris field. It was an awful sight and a very sickening thing to see. My last number is 12. That number represents members of the United States Army Special Forces ODA 595, 12 men sent in to achieve perhaps an unachievable goal. They were told it would be a one-way ticket. They're not sure how they could get them back. But they accepted and answered the call, and they went. I met some of the members of that team last year, and I'm happy to say they all made it back, a little banged up, but they accomplished the mission. Remembering 9/11 is not a choice, but a solemn obligation. We should also remember on that dark day, our nation came together to grieve, find those responsible for this attack, and bring them to justice, and also to rebuild. For a little while, everyone was united as we recovered from the tragedy, tried to understand how this could have been prevented, and build for a secure future. I will leave you with this thought. This day showed our nation and the world the character, bravery, and commitment of our first responders, and exemplifies why freedom and democracy will prevail over tyranny. What would we do without them? These courageous men and women. Who would answer the bell? Who would answer the call?
As we gather here today to pay our respects to the first responders who sacrificed their lives so others could live, we must also remember the brave civilians who found the courage to help evacuate the victims who were trapped inside stairwells under debris, those who provided first aid before EMS could arrive on scene, those who brought food and water to the rescuers working on scene, and those who helped take down a fourth airplane before it could cause even more devastation. The flags you may have seen at York Commons next to Fire Station 2 this week represent each of the 403 first responders who died that day. But we can fill the entire park with flags for the innocent lives who were taken from their families that morning. We as a nation vowed to remember 9/11 and never forget. On this Patriot Day, 19 years later, I thought it would be fitting to tell the stories of just a few of the heroes who made a significant difference when they could have just evacuated the area and fled the scene. On September 11th, 2001 at 8:45 a.m., on a clear morning just like today, an American Airlines Boeing 767 loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impact left a gaping hole near the 80th floor of the 110-story skyscraper, instantly killing hundreds of people and trapping even more on the floors above. As the evacuation of the tower got underway, television cameras broadcasted live images of what initially appeared to be a freak accident. Then, 18 minutes after the first plane hit, a second Boeing 767, United Airlines Flight 175, appeared out of the sky, turned sharply toward the World Trade Center, and sliced into the South Tower at the 60th floor. The collision caused a massive explosion that showered burning debris over surrounding buildings and onto the streets below. It immediately became clear that the United States was under attack. As millions watched the events unfolding in New York, American Airlines Flight 77 circled over downtown Washington, D.C. before crashing into the west side of the Pentagon military headquarters at 9:45 a.m. Jet fuel from the Boeing 757 caused a devastating inferno that led to the structural collapse of portions of the giant concrete building, which is the headquarters to the U.S. Department of Defense. Less than 15 minutes after the terrorists struck the nerve center of the United States military, the horror in New York took a catastrophic turn when the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed in a massive cloud of dust and smoke. At 10:30 a.m., the north building of the Twin Towers collapsed. Only 6 people in the World Trade Center towers at the time of the collapse survived. Almost 10,000 others were treated for injuries. Many of those were severe. Meanwhile, a fourth California-bound plane, United Flight 93, was hijacked just about 40 minutes after leaving Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. The plane had been delayed in taking off, and the passengers on board learned of the events that were happening in New York and Washington via cell phone and phone calls to the ground. Everyone who is old enough to remember the attacks against America on September 11th, 2001, can tell you exactly where they were when that happened. I am certain that each and every one of you still have images of the towers collapsing, the dust-covered rescuers, the police and fire trucks that were destroyed, sitting abandoned on the streets, and the innocent victims jumping from the top floors of the building permanently etched in our minds. Thousands of lives were lost that day, and thousands more were permanently altered. The courage shown by first responders on that day will never fully be realized. The police officers, firefighters, EMTs who ran towards the carnage can never be thanked enough. Each and every one of them deserves the title of hero. What we sometimes fail to recognize is that there were hundreds of civilians who also stepped up that day. If you read any books on 9/11, or if you watch any of the programs they televise, they run throughout the week, or if you search through the internet, you will find countless stories of individuals who gave the ultimate sacrifice to help those in need that day. From ferry boat captains who strategically positioned boats for evacuation, comfort dogs and priests tending to grieving families, to doctors and nurses racing to the scene to treat victims in the street. There are so many people who made a positive impact at the scene. I realize that it is not possible to credit each and every hero of September 11th in a format like we are doing here today. But I wanted to share just a few of the stories of some individuals who during the country's darkest hour served as beacons of light, courage, and sacrifice in the service of humanity. New York Police Department officer Moriah Smith was the first police officer to report terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, when she saw the first plane strike the first tower of the World Trade Center. Smith, a 13-year veteran, ran into the towers and began assisting with the evacuation. Her coolness under pressure was remembered by one of the survivors, Martin Glynn, who said, "The mass of people exiting the building felt the calm assurance that they were being directed by someone in authority who was in control of this situation. Her actions seemed ordinary and even commonplace. She insulated the evacuees from the awareness of the dangerous situations they were in because of her calm, reassuring demeanor. Everything proceeded smoothly." Officer Smith is credited with saving hundreds of lives that day, giving her own in the process. She was the only female New York Police Department officer to die on 9/11. She is survived by a 2-year-old daughter and her husband. Wells Crowther was an investment banker working for Sandler O'Neill Partners on the 104th floor of the second World Trade Center, the South Tower. When UA Flight 175 struck the tower, Crowther also was able to remain calm just a few minutes after the plane hit. He called his mother to let her know he was okay. He then began assisting the evacuation, at one point carrying a woman down 17 flights of stairs, only to return to the 78th floor to continue to help others. Crowther had made it out of the building and was running back in with the Jaws of Life extrication tool when the tower collapsed. He was 24 years old. Rick Rascorlia, a veteran of both the British and American Army, worked in corporate security for Morgan Stanley on the 44th floor of the South Tower. Rick had a fear that the towers would one day be attacked by a terrorist. He became so convinced that he insisted that his company practice evacuation drills. He started running these drills every 3 months on how to get thousands of staff from the company's offices, which covered 40 floors of the South Tower and a site nearby, out of the building as quickly as possible. He is credited for leading over 2,700 people to safety that day. Rascorlia, who was 62, was last seen going back up into the tower right before it collapsed, and his remains were never found. It is now 9:02 a.m. Eastern Time, and United Airlines Flight 175, carrying 65 people from Boston to Los Angeles, crashes into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Oriole Palmer, a battalion chief with the New York Fire Department, was able to single-handedly fix an elevator on the South Tower of the World Trade Center and take it up to the 41st floor sky lobby. Once there, he went on to run up 37 additional flights to reach the plane's impact zone at the 78th floor. Oriole was met there by Fire Marshal Ronald Bucca. The two men, both experienced marathon runners, are believed to have made it to the highest floors of the North Tower before it collapsed. When they arrived there, Oriole reported numerous fatalities and heavy fire conditions. Oriole directed survivors of the impact on how to get out of the building fastest. He relayed essential information to the firemen below over the radio in an attempt to form a strategy to combat the flames and evacuate survivors. He also brought comfort to those struck and injured on the 78th floor by reassuring them that help was coming. Unfortunately, his efforts weren't enough to prevent the buildings from coming down. At 45 years old, Oriole Palmer and Ronald Bucca perished in the Trade Center when it collapsed. Oriole left behind a wife and 3 children. When the members on board United Flight 93 realized that their aircraft was not going to return to the airport and that hijackers had claimed the plane, a group of passengers and flight attendants planned an insurgency. One of the passengers, Thomas Burnett Jr., told his wife over the phone that he knew that everyone on board was going to die, but he said that there was 3 of us who are going to do something about it. He said, "I love you, honey." Another passenger, Todd Beamer, was heard saying, "Are you guys ready? Let's roll," on an open phone line. Sandy Bradshaw, a flight attendant, called her husband and explained that she had slipped into a galley and was filling pitchers with boiling water. Her last words to him were, "Everyone's running to first class. I have to go. Goodbye." The brave passengers fought the 4 hijackers and are expected to have attacked the cockpit with a fire extinguisher. The plane then flipped over and sped towards the ground and upwards of 500 miles per hour, crashing into a rural field near Shanksville in western Pennsylvania at 10:10 a.m. All 44 people aboard were killed. Its intended target is not known, but theories include the White House, the U.S. Capitol, Camp David Presidential Retreat in Maryland, or one of the several nuclear power plants along the eastern seaboard. A total of 2,996 people were killed at the 9/11 attacks, including the 19 terrorist hijackers aboard 4 planes. At the World Trade Center, 2,763 died after 2 planes slammed into the Twin Towers. That figure includes 343 firefighters and paramedics, 23 New York City police officers, and 37 Port Authority police officers who were struggling to complete an evacuation of the building and save office workers trapped on the highest floors. At the Pentagon, 189 people were killed, including 64 on American Airlines Flight 77, the airliner that struck the building. The point I want to make here today is that there were hundreds of people who became heroes on September 11, 2001. Not only police officers, paramedics, and firefighters, but the civilians who were just going to work like any other day. There is no way to know how many lives each of these individuals saved or to how they felt when they realized they would never see their families again. But we must continue to honor and remember them by telling their stories. I had the honor of traveling to New York with 9 other firefighters from our department shortly after the attacks occurred. One of the things I remember most was the outpouring of support, patriotism, and kindness each and every person showed for the first responders and volunteers who were there to help them get through this tragic event. From the moment we arrived, we were treated like we were part of their families. The residents of New York posted signs, cheered for us in the streets, handed out water, and invited us into their homes to eat and sleep. I was amazed to see how the community came together to show how much support and how much they appreciated our efforts. I truly believe that it was this love and support that was given to those affected by these attacks which helped pull New York through one of the most difficult times. I would like to share a quote that was made shortly after the attacks occurred by Senator John Kerry, who said that we must remember the hours after September 11th, when we as a nation came together as one to answer the attacks against our homeland. All of us drew strength from the firefighters who ran up the stairs and risked their lives so that others might live. When rescuers rushed into the smoke and the fire at the Pentagon, when the men and women of Flight 93 sacrificed themselves to save the nation's capital, when flags were hanging from the front porches all across America and strangers became friends. It was the worst day in our country has ever seen, but it brought out the best of us. September 11th is a day that deserves to be remembered every single year, and not because of the events that took place, but because of the people that are no longer with us, those that risked their lives to do what was right. It is important to remember the firefighters, police officers, office employees, family members who lost their lives each and every year. Even though time has passed and it has been 19 years since these attacks occurred, there will be no forgetting those who died on September 11th. Thank you. At this time, I would like to have the fire department chaplain, Father Andrew Georgianis from St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church, to come up to the podium for our benediction.
Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, have mercy. O Lord our God, who are yourself the hope of the hopeless, the help of the helpless, the Savior of the storm-tossed, the haven of the voyager, the physician of the sick, be all things to our land, which 19 years ago on this date was devastated by the cowardly and hateful acts of false martyrs, who imitated wicked Herod in his slaughter of 14,000 innocent children, whose only crime was to be born at the time of your incarnation. For those who lost loved ones, grant the comfort you imparted to Mary and Martha before you raised Lazarus, and care for them as you did care for your mother from the cross, putting her in the care of the Apostle John. For the survivors, grant them healing in every sense, as you strengthened and healed the confessors. For those related to and aiding the survivors and the families of the fallen, grant the strength and compassion you did instill in your foster father Joseph, who was your guardian in your earthly youth. For those who died, grant them remission of their every sin in your great compassion. Both those who, like the wise servant and the wise virgins, constantly prepared themselves to enter the heavenly banquet at any hour, and those who emulated the rich fool, preferring to enjoy earthly pursuits and ignore heavenly ones. To the rest of us, instill in us the knowledge that while the devil still manipulates our divinely given free will to his own ends in this world, his power is fleeting and ultimately void, as you have already crushed his dominion, leaving to him only those who freely choose him. Remind us that while evil at times seems to win, and the death of the innocent seems to signal the destruction of goodness. The innocent are at peace, and while the God-fearing will endure a period of torment, those who choose evil shall endure eternal torment. For those who hate us, speak to their hearts, as Saint Procla sought to speak to her husband Pilate concerning you, and as you did speak to Pharaoh concerning the Hebrews, so often the hearts of those who seek our destruction. Spare us, O Lord, from us all hatred of the murderers, and from prejudice toward those whose only crime is to be of their ethnicity and or religion. Spare us, O Lord, from paranoia and rash acts by which we trample each other like rabid beasts. Spare, O Lord, those who protect us, those who serve in our government, our armed forces, law enforcement agencies, and all first responders from despondency, disillusionment, and all things which would undermine their righteous calling to protect us in the manner of our guardian angels and care for us in the manner of the Good Samaritan. All this we ask of you, our all-powerful and all-loving Savior, together with your unoriginate Father and your all-holy and good and life-giving Spirit, now and forever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. May their memory be eternal. We will never forget.
In the past, as firefighters began their tour of duty, it was the bell that signaled the beginning of that day's shift. Throughout the day and night, each alarm sounded by a bell, which summoned these brave souls to fight fires and to place their lives in jeopardy for the good of their fellow citizen. And when the fire was out and the alarm had come to an end, it was the bell that signaled to all that the completion of the call. When a firefighter had died in the line of duty, paying the supreme sacrifice, it was the mournful toll of the bell that solemnly announced a comrade's passing. We utilize these traditions as symbols which reflect honor and respect to those who have given so much and who serve so well. To symbolize the devotion that these brave souls had for their duty, a special signal of 3 rings, 3 times each, represents the end of our comrades' duties and that they will be returning to quarters. And now, to conclude our ceremony, the honor guard will ring the bell in honor of those brave first responders who have lost their lives. These brave men and women have completed their tasks, their duties are done, and they have given their best. For our fallen brothers and sisters, we remember their last alarm.